Hey folks, Dave the Not So Evil Viking 13 here, and welcome back to my version of Vault 88. This was a very large and pretty complicated build, and as requested, in this video, I'm going to give you guys a technical breakdown of how I built some of the parts of it. If you missed out on the full tour, I'm going to suggest that you actually not watch this more technical breakdown first. Instead, click the card on the screen right now, or the link in the description, to watch the full start-to-finish cinematic tour of Vault 88. I think you'll enjoy it a lot more that way because there is a lot of lore involved. But for those of you guys who want to see how I put some of this together, and you've already seen the tour, this is the breakdown video for you guys. But even though I'm going back in time to visit the vault once again, before the events of the ending of that tour video take place, to keep it lore friendly, I am in disguise as General Dave. You guys who've watched that video will know why. On a side note, if you guys want to know which mods I'm using, because of course the mods that I use are a big part of these settlement builds, you can check the Google Doc linked in the description for a complete mod list of every mod that I use with links to download them. So let's start things off by going into free cam here at the 100 Rads bar, so you guys can get an overview of what we're looking at. Alright, as you guys can see, I turned Vault 88 into an underground survival city for the Brotherhood of Steel. That's because in my playthrough of the game, I sided with the Minutemen and the Railroad, and there came a point in the main quest where I had to make a choice, and we had to eliminate the Pridwin, the Brotherhood's airship. So I've been wondering for the last year, mainly because you guys have been asking, as I build all of my Minutemen settlements, what has the Brotherhood been up to? I killed a lot of them on the Pridwin, but odds are, somebody would have survived that attack. So this settlement was a unique way for me to answer the question of what happened to them for my playthrough in my save game. This underground space is also a unique opportunity to create something that reminds me a bit of Little Lamplight from Fallout 3, and as you guys pointed out, a little bit of Metro 2033 as well with the underground subway stations, while still incorporating a couple of the actual vault pieces for different parts of the build. Before I show you guys a few of the technical ways that I put this whole thing together, let's go back in time. I'm going to load one of my save games and show you guys what inspired the beginning of this build. Okay, and here we are. So this, guys, is what Vault 88 looked like in my save game around the beginning of March, I think. I had just started laying out a couple of different pieces and blocking out my ideas for this location. Let's go into free cam. Whoop, there we go. And you guys can see that I've left almost all of the Vault-Tec boxcars and railroad cars in place. I really loved this underground vault railroad depot. I wanted to incorporate it into the build rather than just scrapping it and building stuff out of just vault pieces. Obviously this is the Vault 88 settlement location, but I've already done a secret vault on my own at 10 Pines Bluff, even though it was more of a DIA military bunker style vault, and I really like the idea of taking this underground rail yard and turning it into a city. When I first started working on Vault 88, I had just finished up my automated factory at the Mechanist Lair, which was my entry in Joel and I's settlement building competition, which he won. That was a very technical build that required a lot of prototyping and wiring and work to get the whole factory working together as one complete unit, and it was pretty light on the lore. It was really just a actual working factory for my Minutemen faction, which is cool, that's what I wanted. But Joel really came out swinging with his settlement build with all kinds of really fun background detail and lore. I really felt like that's what my settlement was lacking. It had a really amazing technical achievement, in my opinion. It was cool that I've actually been able to use that factory to produce goods for my other settlement builds, but it was definitely lacking even compared to my other settlements in the lore department. So there at the beginning of March, I was determined right from the start to make up for it with Vault 88. I wanted a pretty deep, interesting backstory, hopefully with a couple of twists and turns along the way. I have a Google document where I keep a running list of all of my settlement ideas. And as I get an idea, or you guys suggest something that you want to see, and if I see people suggest it multiple times in a row especially, I'll jot down a couple of notes around an idea and then shelve it for later use. The idea of a Brotherhood survival settlement wasn't a new idea for me, but the idea to incorporate it here at Vault 88 was the twist that I've been looking for. Like I mentioned, I wanted to take this really cool looking rail yard and somehow create a location where it seemed like people had taken what was already here, these Vault Tech rail cars and all of the infrastructure, the air system, the electricity, and all of the building materials, and turn it into a large scale city. My only hesitation was that I keep ending up doing these massive city-sized builds with builds as large as the Sanctuary at Somerville Place, my original city at Sanctuary, which while outdated is still a very large build, and my boot camp at Sunshine Tidings Co-op, which spiraled out of control size-wise, if you ask me, and turned into a huge build scale-wise. So yeah, I love the idea of turning this entire underground central space with the rail yard into a city, but I would definitely say that the scope of yet another huge city-sized build gave me some pretty serious pause. I wasn't sure how much time I could commit to that and how much I could actually fit into the build. Adding the Brotherhood concept to it though, I decided it was going to be well worth it to give it a shot, and even if I had to scale things down before the end, I decided to go ahead and dive in and see what I could come up with. As I got started, as you guys can see here, I just laid a couple of those prototyping pieces around a few of the sections that were already here to figure out how I wanted to lay things out. I wanted these really cool modded spotlights that actually do cast, as you guys can see here, real 3D shadows. I wanted them pointed right at the door so that the first thing you would see coming into the build would be these kind of imposing walls for this huge underground city with lots of bright lights right in your face. I wanted it to feel a little bit like stepping off of the submersible in the BioShock series for the first time, or perhaps entering a new location in Metro 2033. I wanted that first entranceway to leave a lasting impression, and I'll jump forward here in a minute and show you guys what that ended up looking like. I also want to show you guys a couple of things off of my notes for the build, which I started out with from the very beginning, but added to along the way. As I cover some of those working notes, I'll show you guys a slightly further on save game as I was building Vault 88. This save game is, I'd say, about another 15 hours or so into constructing the underground city. You guys can see that I've cleaned up some of the stuff that I was placing down as placeholders here at the entranceway, and I'm beginning to flesh out some of the main structures, which of course right now are floating. One of my rules for my builds is being realistic. I want to make sure that nothing's actually floating by the end, but during the prototyping phase, there's a lot of stuff just floating kind of everywhere as I figure out how the large structures are going to work. I added this central vault section because I couldn't have a build at Vault 88 without at least some vault pieces. I imagined this, as you can see from the spotlights here, as the location where the Brotherhood survivors honor the other members of the Brotherhood that died during the attack on the Pridwin. You can also see much of the Overseer's area has already taken shape at this point. In my notes, I had described a lot of unfinished vault sections here in Vault 88 that were built on scaffolding and girders all over the walls. I scaled that down from my initial plans of having it cover large sections of the vault, and really just kept it to this section right here to leave more room among the rail cars for our survival city. That way, it would look more ramshackle and run down, as you can see by the fire barrels that I'm already placing to get an idea of what I want the lighting to look like. Again, This is probably about 15 hours after that last save game, but probably a good 25 hours into the build already. I would give my total time at, I'd say at least 60 to 70 hours of total work on this build. I've also tried to already lay out a couple of unique pipes and fences to help break up the blocky vault style silhouettes and even those blocky boxcars. I don't want everything lined up too neatly. Now, rather than go over my notes in detail here in the video, I've linked them in the description where you guys can check them out for yourself and compare how my initial notes kind of changed and evolved over the course of the build and how they compare to the final result. From the very beginning, I wanted the very cool looking Vault-Tec passenger railcar to be converted into kind of low rent apartments. And because you can't scrap individual parts in this car, I had to make the benches a part of the build along with all of the trash and stuff like that. You guys probably didn't even notice, but I even went on top of the luggage racks here and placed some boards, which right now are kind of glitched as you can see in this save game. But by the end of the build, there were boards on the luggage racks with people's possessions stored along the top as if they're actually living here. That's a detail that I forgot to even point out during the final tour. I didn't even notice it, it blended in so well. As you guys can see, from the beginning I had a pretty decent idea of what I was going for, and the design of the settlement itself flowed organically from those notes. Now that we have a good idea of what led up to the design of this settlement, let's take a look at some of the nitty-gritty details, and I'll show you guys a few of my actual technical decisions along the way. And of course, seeing you guys have already seen the full tour with the UI turned off, I'll be showing you guys these technical parts with workshop mode on as I explain how some of this was put together. I don't know how many of you guys noticed the dramatic lighting on my Walking Dead Easter egg here on the outside of Vault 88, where the Brotherhood had created a facade of a horrible underground layer of monsters to keep people out. This was designed to, well, just be a really dramatic entranceway for the settlement. But the lighting itself was a bit of trickery that you guys might not have noticed. Notice the grating right here in the wall. I actually rotated that into place using the Place Everywhere mod. And I'll show you guys behind the curtain, if you will. This is what's running things back here. I have the construction light mod that lets it actually cast shadows, and I was happy to see that the shadows are even cast through textures like this grating piece. So to create that dramatic lighting for the entrance, I set up this noisy light rig, if you will, behind the windows here to project the light out into the entranceway. Again, this is an hour or two of work that you guys probably don't even notice in the final tour. It just adds to the effect. Like I've always said for my settlement builds, when people ask, you know, what's the secret? How do you get, you know, such crazy amounts of detail? Well, the answer really is a lot of time and a lot of careful work. There really is no substitute. And as you guys can see, it works out pretty well. We have some nice bright highlights that look really cool on this defensive turret. And then just like I planned, some nice shadows from the grate on our posters here. Surface never, vault forever. And then the Vault Boy statue rotated into place, giving a bloody thumbs up thanks to the Place Everywhere mod. And then lots of spikes and stuff like that placed with the Homemaker mod to give it that monster dungeon look, which again is just really a front for the Brotherhood to keep questioning people out. Even this graffiti was a custom modded texture added on top. Here you guys can see the result of my initial plans of that dramatic lighting as you enter the vault. This is that imposing entrance that I wanted, where you come through and it's visibly some kind of giant underground city, but that you really can't see because of the defensive walls. Another neat thing, going back to the lights that I used in the outer entranceway, and then again the construction lights here, is I made what I would consider pretty efficient use of these very cool shadow casting construction lights to create this dramatic lighting. Because this settlement is in an underground cell location separate from the outside world, we did have more frame rate and memory overhead to work with, so I could get away with using a bit more of these demanding lights that do cast shadows that normally you can't place more than a couple for your FPS tanks. I made sure to keep these vault pieces, and if you place them back into place, the trash and rubble comes back, and I wanted to keep that and make good use of it. Stuff like that is pretty hard to place, so when it's there, I definitely try and use it. But I can place some trash on my own, and you guys will notice around the settlement some bits of puddle and trash and rocks and debris. That's actually stuff that I have placed as extra detailing, just like someone actually has been living here for a while. As far as extra detailing goes, I use one of my traditional tricks, and that's lots of ground planks. Now here I used some of the official Bethesda, I think it's the barn planks, but I placed them not using snapping where things look, let's see if I can line them up, they look rigid and fake, but I would turn snapping off with place everywhere, turn off ground clipping, and just get bits of rotation to make it look like it was done by hand. You guys can also see that with some pallets right here. Again, this is all stuff that is not even worth pointing out during the tour, but it's stuff that I think is necessary for making a realistic looking settlement. It's these small details that you don't even notice, that when they're not there, when the barrels and the trash is not present, it just looks so much plainer. It does suck because I spend a good amount of time doing things like placing trash and stuff like that on the ground and plywood for an effect that yeah, it's just a background effect. You guys basically expect it because that's what Bethesda does. That's what makes things look lived in. It's a lot of extra time, but in my opinion, it's well worth it to make it look very lived in and very Bethesda quality. Going back to the dramatic lighting, you guys can see that it even works up here where the light is hitting some just vault stuff that I placed as storage to fill this empty space over the entranceway. What would normally be a very blank and boring section can be a lot more interesting just with the right lighting. Just as I imagined it, a repurposed Vault-Tec boxcar turned into housing by the Brotherhood survivors. And I added a couple more of them down here, which you can see right there. I had plans for even more of these boxcars, but after detailing a couple of them, I decided that they wouldn't be very interesting to tour one after the other. So I actually ended up leaving this one right here, as you guys can see, completely blank, and we just passed right by it in the tour. I was trying to make things a bit more efficient. At the end of the day, I think the 3 or 4 boxcars that I had as housing were plenty to add to the effect that I was looking for. One regret that I kind of do have is that I spent so much time detailing this shack that I had placed up on stilts. It's got all the scaffolding right there. I think looking back, just to save some time and some sanity, both in the tour and in the building process, I could have just locked a door on this and placed some basic furniture inside and just looked at it from the ground. I think that's all that was really needed to be like, oh yeah, that's some of the additional housing. That would have kept things moving just a bit faster because at the end of the day, the housing isn't the most interesting or the most highlighted part of the build, nor should it be. Again, up front, I wanted to have a lot of these nice shadow casting spotlights to create a dramatic focus, just because I think the plants look really cool casting all the shadows. In case you guys couldn't tell, I'm a sucker for some dramatic lighting. But also to have this be the focus right here of our impaled Minutemen statue. I joked that all of my settlements will always have to have my Minutemen statue, so that apparently includes settlements that don't belong to the Minutemen. And I was pretty happy with how this came out as a way to incorporate my statue that I have to have for every settlement, but into a settlement that again does not belong to the Minutemen. A few of my other favorite things from this build is actually the rail cars. I grew up next to a railroad, and I've gotten to ride some historical steam engines, and I just think rail travel is super relaxing. And I love what Bethesda has done with the Vault-Tec underground boxcars, and that was a central part of my idea for this build. But again, where's the one boxcar? We don't have the ability to just scrap stuff inside of these. This boxcar here is the backbone of our trading post. You can move it around as one unit, as you guys can see there, but you can't just scrap the boxes out of it. So to make housing out of rail cars, I actually had to scrap the boxcar, make sure that I kept the railroad tracks piece, as you guys can see here, because I cannot build those even with mods. And then I did use mods, I think one of the Greeble mods, to place a railroad flat car. Let me get where you guys can see it there. And I used that as a base for some of our midtown lodging here. And then I used the shack wall and roof from the metal category to create my own version of a rickety rail car. From there, as you guys can see, it was just a matter of spending all the time to add all of the individual furniture pieces, the posters, and Easter eggs like our guy with the glue sniffing problem. Although now that I'm looking, this appears to not actually be the final save game, because a few details are missing. So let me go ahead and load up the actual save game. Phew, I've got so many different copies, guys. It's ridiculous. Okay, guys, I loaded my save game from the night that Joel and I recorded the tour, and it looks like I goofed up pretty badly after the recording was complete, because I loaded the wrong save game before I continued back out into the Commonwealth. And as you guys probably know, I've been working on other builds since then, and I've been doing so off of an incomplete version of this settlement. So I'm probably going to have to export my own settlement from this version of the save game and re-import it into the one where I've been working at Kingsport Lighthouse, because I goofed up. Anyway, there's those missing details placed with OC Decorator, the glue sniffing survivor here with his cot. That's the other part of making these detailed settlements, besides just putting in the time, is the little details really do matter. I have this Vault-Tec card set texture that I made way back for the Pleasure Island at Spectacle Island build last year. Anyway, let's take a look at one more area here, the 100 Rads bar. This is an area that has probably some of my favorite lighting. Let me just turn off my UI entirely, just so you guys can see. If you don't have your video at 1440p, go ahead and crank it up to maximum resolution for the higher bit rate so you can see all the details here, because a lot of detail went into this. The lanterns on the dining room tables, I stole that idea directly from Joel's settlement in our settlement building competition at the Mechanist Lair, and I think it works really, really well here for this underground city. Adds a lot of really moody atmospheric lighting to complement our Brotherhood posters. And again, everything here is built around these railroad tracks, even this cart that I added after removing a boxcar that was going to be in the way.
Not many doctors around these days.
It's all about the details. And I'll post a link to a screenshot here if this person would just get out of my way so I can take one. Oh, come on now. A screenshot in the description so you guys can appreciate the lighting here. A couple of times in this build, as I mentioned in the original tour video, I used modded lights that cast dark, dramatic shadows. Generally, in fact, I think none of the official Bethesda lights actually cast any shadows. And that's simply because most of the time they're not really needed, and primarily they're very, very expensive to render. I believe, yeah, their fire barrels cast shadows. That's one thing that does. There we go, workshop mode. But none of their electric lights do cast shadows. So let me just grab, where is it? There we go. I had to move the roof up 4 or 5 times before I could grab the light. But there you guys can see, that's the cage light that casts the shadows. And if I move it over here, the bar is just not the same without it. I picked the locations that I wanted to use lights with shadows very, very carefully, and I think the bar was a great location to use one. The stoplight light is cool, but if you look at the bottles and the card game and the food here on the countertop, there's no shadows cast, and if you look too closely, it just doesn't look quite right. You also got light from these fire barrels bleeding through, and that can be kind of distracting, and you really just can't see all of this extra work that I did in the back here with all these, see, clocks. Oh man, I forgot about this stuff. The food on top of the icebox, the cleaning solution, the menus, the mounted animal head. You guys probably can't even see most of that, and honestly, I forget about a ton of this stuff during the actual tours because there's just so many small details that I spend so much time adding, even I forget them. But by adding a light that does cast shadows into this bar area, I think I had it over here, it adds a really cool contrast that I think anchors the entire bar area. It's just not the same without it. Another area that I used a dramatic shadow casting light on was, as I mentioned in the actual tour video, the vault area itself. I'm going to jog over there and I'll show you guys the exact same thing. It's the same idea. It's an area of interior space with lots of detailing that just didn't look as interesting with the traditional Bethesda lights. It needed that modded light with the shadows to make it look dramatic and realistic, really. Joel actually noticed the lighting in here when we came up during the tour, that I think he said in certain conditions the lighting in Fallout can just look really, really realistic. And that is exactly what I was going for, as you guys can see by the example going across the screen right now. When you remove the light that casts the shadows, it's just not the same. I showed you guys the vault car before. Here's how it all came together. That's individual planks and posters placed to create the detailing. There's the door removed for that extra room in the back. You can see right inside. These right here were actually some metal planks, but I did that down the entire car, getting some of them actually inside of the window sill areas. So I can't even get at that one. It's smacked right into the center of the windowsill, and the car won't let me grab it. Then there's the final detailing passes right at the end of a settlement build, where I add the final signs and banners and stuff like newspapers, books, cameras, extra pillows, teddy bears, and the like, which gives things that additional bit of lived-in look. I do generally design things in passes where I'll build those big structures like you guys saw in that first save game. Then I'll go through and add things like railings, and I'll go through, if you guys will notice for the railings here, and I'll use place everywhere to give them a little bit of tilt. Essentially, wherever possible, I try not to just snap something onto a piece and then call it a day. Give it a little bit of character with place everywhere. And one final note on lighting before I ramble on too long here, guys. Basically, you don't want to have everything just totally whited out for your lighting. You want to have some dark spots. You want to have that contrast that makes it visually appealing and not overwhelming, because if you look around, that's a lot to take in. And if everything had that bright yellow light, I'm pointing with my fingers and you guys can't see, I'll do it with a pointer. If the entire part of this build had that bright yellow light all over, there would be no way for your eyes to focus on any one part of it. You'd be drawn to everything at once. By mixing those different lights and different color temperatures of lights to create that contrast, it lets your eyes move around the settlement naturally from interest point to interest point without things getting overwhelming. This officer area ended up being a very interesting challenge in the use of space. And here's an actual glitch that I missed. There's scientific gear under the table that was not supposed to be there. Oh, it must have been linked to this. This got moved and the other got moved with it. So I did have at least one mistake in here. But yeah, this particular area ended up being a very fun exercise in using space. I wanted the Brotherhood to have some mechanical research going on, which we have here with this kind of mini factory that they're building with some Vault Tech factory materials. But we also have areas like, I was wondering if this was going to be some kind of Vault Tech inner atrium. It would probably have some food facilities, which is pretty straightforward to build. Got a nice looking modern clean kitchen, but also some bathroom facilities. And I was like, if I want to have some communication stuff in here, and I want to have the factory, there's just no room for bathrooms left. And that's where I built out of homemaker pieces, vault walls, homemaker props, atrium walls clipped into the floor, and Billy Bro's beefy columns, which are from oh, what's that one mod collection? It's in my mod design document in the description. But yeah, I built these bathrooms out of just a wild amount of different pieces, and as you guys can tell, the space is so very carefully measured. It's a very, very tight fit. Those took honestly more time to do than they were really worth, which is why I had talked about it in the actual tour. But I think you guys will agree that that was a cool use of space and something that you don't see very often. Even in here though, where I'm obviously using a lot of these snappable vault pieces, I went around and added all kinds of greebles, detailing pieces to break up the silhouette. And like the plywood planks, that's the kind of stuff that you guys probably don't even notice. But it just helps to get rid of that, oh, I snapped this together from the Bethesda piece set look, where things don't quite look as copy and paste. Got, oh yeah, even out here, some bits of like wiring and air conditioning, and then the Institute air scrubber things in the back. Anything to break up the repeating, snapping, atrium tiling pieces that of course everyone has access to. I'm always of the opinion that just having mods that let you build new things isn't enough. You've got to use them in convincing ways. And the best way, in my opinion, to use additional mods that let you build new things is to mix and match them with what Bethesda already added to the game. If you can mix things like these air scrubber greebles together with the snappable pieces, and then mix things like this official Bethesda banner with some modded graffiti like the Brotherhood logo right there, and this cool looking wild wasteland hawk thing, you can create some very unique and appealing pieces of construction for your settlements that are both eye-catching, they're lore-friendly, and, well, obviously unique. And that's the kind of stuff that I aim for when building my settlements. Alright guys, that is enough rambling for tonight. My voice is about shot. I hope you guys have enjoyed this slight technical breakdown of how I built my underground Brotherhood survival city at Vault 88. If you guys have been wondering, and I know a number of you have, this might not be the actual end of the Brotherhood in the Commonwealth, even for my personal save game. That's all I'm going to say about that for now, other than to say that there are plenty of settlements coming up. I've got that Google Doc packed full of ideas still, and in case you guys couldn't tell, I am still having a blast creating these settlements, and I love that I get to share them with you guys. I appreciate you guys watching, thanks for your support, and I'll catch you next time.